How do you see the chances, Jovanka, of Magnus winning game 2 and finishing off the match?
Somehow I don't think that he's going to actually play aggressively for the win here. I think that he's satisfied with actually securing a draw, because then that puts Duda in a must-win situation, and that's very, very difficult. So there we see Magnus opening with his king's pawn, and I'm very excited now, because this is the Carlsen, and this is my favourite opening on the planet. I play it on a regular basis, and I look forward to seeing how Magnus treats the position as white, and also how Duda handles Magnus's ideas.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. This is kind of a mirror of the game that ended Magnus Carlsen's 125-game unbeaten streak, because in that matchup, Magnus Carlsen played the Carlsen against Duda. And this time it's roles reversed. Duda using that weapon, Jovanka's favourite opening, against the world champion. And there's lots of tension in the position. Jovanka, what do you think of this line?
It's a very solid line. So, I mean, the whole idea is that you do allow black to capture the pawn in the centre, and you do allow this trade of queens. But then white is saying, you know, I have a little bit of extra space in the middle of the board. So it's quite an interesting, it's trendy. So maybe Duda, who is not a regular Carlsen player, might not know exactly how to treat this position.
Yeah, and I must admit, I've played some kind of informal blitz games with Magnus, and he used this one against me quite a lot when he had white. Anytime I played the Carlsen, he would use this setup to try and neutralise me. So clearly Magnus likes these positions, as you mentioned there, Jovanka. Trading a set of pawns in the centre for black would have just ended in a queen trade, and because of the match situation, that was only going to help Magnus. If the queens disappear, he's not going to lose this game. He's just too good in those endgames, Magnus. So Duda, instead of releasing the tension, trading pawns in the centre, as we mentioned, he's just pushed a pawn himself, and that's to create a fianchetto possibility for his bishop, the black bishop coming out to a long diagonal soon. Meanwhile, Magnus, OK, trading a set of pawns in the centre. This is really uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you.
You look shocked, Jovanka.
I am totally shocked, because it really doesn't fit in with what I know about this position. I was expecting the white knight maybe to come and develop itself to the d2 square. That's just losing time. Yeah. And interesting, did he do this to you?
Nope.
At any time?
And wow, Duda coming up with, surprised on every move, but Duda coming up with something quite creative. He's offering a trade of dark squared bishops, and that's not common either for this type of variation. Normally, black's bishop has a really nice home on the g7 square, as we mentioned, the fianchetto on a long diagonal. Now, this exchange of dark squared bishops, it's not clear who that's going to favour. Also, if white now, with his dark squared bishop, goes and captures this black bishop that's just moved, black will end up with a knight on the edge of the board, and that has pros, cons. It's a really weird opening. And you did mention there, Jovanka, white lost time. That's because white moved his d pawn one square, and 2 moves later moved it again. So not recommended for anyone at home. Not recommended at any level, actually, unless you're the world champion and you can get away with things. But, yeah, very, very surprising. Normally, white's main move by far is to actually step forward with the other pawn in the centre of the board earlier, once black prepares the fianchetto. So, yeah, Magnus now, the computer likes his position, says +1, but slightly over-enthusiastic, it feels like, because this is still relatively standard, just with a weird move order to reach this position. And, OK, meanwhile, Magnus doesn't go for the bishop trade on black's terms. He says, yes, you can take the bishops off, but you have to spend the time doing that. And instead, developing his light square bishop, creating a pin. Yeah. So very natural, and, yeah, the evaluation bar seeing that actually it's pretty balanced, neither side with any big weaknesses so far.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen this dark square bishop foray to the edge of the board and offer itself up for a trade, but I haven't seen it when the bishop is sat there on the c1 square. So I like Magnus's choice, you know, just developing the light square bishop and putting the question to black. Are you going to trade off bishops in order to complete developments? What are you going to do with your light squared bishop? And now this is going to be the most pressing issue for black. Because take a look at Magnus's little luxury move there on the right, pushing Harry 1 square. It's a very subtle move, but what it does do is it deprives the light squared bishop of the g4 square. And this means that suddenly it becomes a very awkward piece, this light squared bishop for black, because it doesn't have a nice square to go to.
Yeah, Magnus just laughing.
He's always laughing.
There,
But you know something? I learned something when I did my Chess Talks interview with Henrik Carlsen, is that Magnus plays really well when he's in a good mood. And so Magnus's team actually prepare they prepared jokes, which surprised me because I just assumed it was like spontaneous, like chit chat. But no, they prepare jokes, they prepare conversations as to things to put Magnus in a good mood. And it was also really interesting that they said that Magnus last year became an uncle, and Magnus's little nephew joined them in the World Championship match. And he said that it was really lovely to have an infant there because this infant, brings such innocence and enthusiasm. So whenever it was a difficult game for Magnus, he could just play with this little kid, and his shoulders would sink down, and he could relax.
Yeah, that's nice. All right, well, in this game, it's a must-not-lose situation for young Christoph Duda. And if Magnus wins it, it's over. He will be the winner of the Charity Cup. This position, though, does it, often become winning for white or black?
It can do, but that happens much later on. So this type of opening, to me, it shows that Magnus wants to just survive the opening, not allow Jan Christoph any activity. Now, if you look at Black's pieces, half of them are still asleep. Black's king still in the centre, and it's just hard to open up lines as well. No matter which pawn pushes in the centre Black goes for, we'll just see some trades, and that definitely isn't what Duda wants. So, okay, meanwhile, Duda attacking White's light-squared bishop, a bit of a committal decision, but to me it says, okay, it's a bit slow. This pawn push, ignoring piece development, Magnus now can trade off his bishop for a black knight. Not what he likes to do. Remember, we talked about the bishop pair earlier. Magnus preferring bishops over knights, usually. But White gains a lot of time if he does just capture this black knight. Then White has another move to maybe plant the white knight in the centre of the board, bring White's rook opposite the black king. Lots of tempting moves here for Magnus. And, either way, it's still very early days, but it looks like Magnus has got a very safe, stable, harmonious position, and it is becoming about manoeuvring. We mentioned that favours the world champion. At least it did yesterday. And Duda just unable to get the type of active, chaotic, kind of imbalanced position where he really thrives. It looks like decent strategy, decent choice in a situation where Magnus is happy with a draw. Would love to get a win, of course, but not losing is the key for Magnus. I think he's chosen well in the opening. Duda, meanwhile, you can tell on his body language, okay, Magnus choosing to keep his bishops, very characteristic of him, but you can tell on Duda's body language, he's not that excited by his position. He knows it's okay. Black is not losing. Black's not in any trouble yet, but it's just not his type of style, really.
And look at that, Uda from Studio Oslo, our graphics operator, donated $16. Thank you, Uda. Uda is also the one making sure we have all this graphics up on the screen, so thank you for that as well, Uda. And if this is the last game, well, then we don't have a lot of time to make our $150,000 goal. So if you as well have the possibility to donate to UNICEF's life-saving work in Ukraine, then please do so. And look at that, Stefan from the US donated $205. Thank you so much.
I got very excited.
Yeah, I got a little excited. I see the bar going up, our donation bar. It's incredible, you guys. So thank you for the chess community just coming together in this crisis. And it's going to be exciting now to follow that donation bar throughout the rest of today, however long it will be. We do have another move.
We do have another move, and Duda not really dealing with the problem of the Black King. The Black King is still stranded in the middle of the board. For now, it's okay, but Duda just bring his rook across, and Magnus solidifies the white pawn centre. If you look at White's pawn in the centre of the board now, really, really firm. It's going to be hard for Black to break through that. And this is actually what we call the Carlsbad structure. It arises from lots of different types of openings, the Queen's Gambit, the Caro-Kann, and a few others as well. But it's all about pattern recognition, and Magnus, he's a real connoisseur of that Queen's Gambit, of this type of pawn structure with both colours. This is where, just having studied games of previous world champions, having played all these different types of openings himself, will come in handy. Duda may be slightly less well-versed in this type of structure, especially with the pawns. So, okay, Duda, meanwhile, bringing the Black Queen out, still delaying his attempts to castle the Black King. But it's getting risky for him.
It is getting risky. I have to say, I don't really like the way Duda has handled this position.
Seems a bit uncertain.
Definitely, because the more he delays taking a decision with his dark square bishop, the more White has just improved the position. You know, the rook is now opposite the king, danger. And I don't see what the black queen is doing and the black rook is doing. Maybe it didn't even want to be there. I mean, I think it's just way too soon to take those type of decisions. King safety is what matters. And yeah, that's just, yeah, I don't know. I'm a big Carlsen fan, but I don't think this is the way to play it.
Yeah.
I'm such a big fan of the Carlsen. I went and I bought myself a Carlsen jumper from the Chess24 shop.
Ah, that's cool.
And I was standing outside in my hotel during the show, and someone came and joined me, and he's like, "Cool jumper." So I was like, "Oh, fellow chess player." And then he kind of brought me down to earth, and he goes, "No, no." But I have a very similar jumper. It says Coca Corolla, and then he kind of. I was like, "Okay." Like the Corona, I was like, "Yeah, I get it." But yeah, it's a nice bright red hoodie.
Ah, the Chess24 store.
Yeah, I've been after one of the cups for ages, but I didn't get that, so I thought, Carlsen is my thing. I've written 2 books on it. I like it. I love the opening, so why not just buy the hoodie?
Definitely. And you guys, you can also buy this fantastic chessboard signed by world champion Magnus Carlsen. Current bid, $5,100. That is amazing, but all money goes to an incredibly important case, UNICEF's life-saving work in Ukraine. So, I mean, go ahead, bid some more. 1 hour and 55 minutes left in this auction. And we also have the Air Things device, also signed by Magnus Carlsen, up for grabs. The current bid is $400. That one can also be yours. It also monitors air quality, in addition to having Magnus's signature. And now Jan Christoph Duda is thinking, I'm wondering if his air quality is a little bad today. That first game, was that one basically down to just Magnus playing some genius moves?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be too harsh on Duda. Even yesterday, he didn't play that badly, Duda, but Magnus was just better. And same in the first game today. Magnus came armed with a fantastic opening idea, first of all, which Duda just couldn't recover from, didn't know how to react to. But even later in the game, when he was on the back foot, maybe Duda missing 1 or 2 defensive resources, but we can't blame him because Magnus was just too powerful. And sometimes in chess, we can get angry about our defeats. Normally, when I lose, I'm angry if I played badly or if I feel I kind of beat myself in a way, just kind of made a blunder or something. But Duda, how can he be angry? He's just coming up against one of the best players in history in top form. And sometimes you just got to shrug your shoulders and think, OK, that happens, that's life. And OK, Duda would like a chance in this game at least. And he would like to feel that he played one good game maybe at least in this final. But it's going to be hard. Look at the clock times already. He's down 4 minutes on the clock. The Black King's still in the middle. The dark squared bishops looking at each other. Maybe we have to jump in to show why he's thinking so long and why 2 Carlsen opening players here, myself and Jovanka, are maybe biased towards white, which doesn't feel right. It's all because of this Black King. It's still stuck in the middle. As Jovanka mentioned, eyed up by the white rook indirectly. It's going to be feeling a bit uncomfortable there, but it is this tension between the 2 bishops. I mentioned putting the bishop on this square, putting Black's bishop out here is quite creative, it's imaginative, but the problem is, if you don't capture the white bishop, then what's it doing here? It means that the black knight is stuck defending it at the top of the board. If you do trade, however, then the downside is after you do finally develop your knight, wanting to castle your king, of course, then white's queen can get aggressive. You've actually helped white's queen improve herself because look at this diagonal. She completely dominates the dark squares now and she can actually jump into the black position using the squares that the black bishop has vacated. And there are so many weaknesses. She's going to sneak in, attack this rook maybe. The black king cannot castle now. You cannot castle through check. The white queen covers the square next to the black king, and this only helps white. So Duda trying to delay this decision. He's hoping that white is the one to capture the bishops on black's terms, and actually he's just pushed his pawn forward. But this loses a lot more time, and also, how is this bishop feeling about this last pawn move? The bishop trapped behind the white squared pawns. And yeah, he's hoping Magnus trades these bishops because now the black knight might actually the black knight might jump into the center. It actually finds active squares, but Magnus isn't going to allow that. Exactly what he's done. Magnus is going to continue delaying that decision, and in the current position, he just brings his knight out. Black brings the knight out too, now that this diagonal is blocked, but Magnus is going to start gravitating his pieces maybe towards the king side, towards the right side of the board. OK, he actually goes in the other direction with this knight at least, but this tension opened up once more. If you trade as Black, then this white queen is going to sneak into all the dark squares. You cannot trade. That means you must lose more time. And I'm expecting Duda to just go back and admit he lost a move with this whole maneuver. He came out, but then he has to retreat now back to this square. You have to keep the dark squares defended.
And one of the plans that white often utilizes is actually to stick a knight in the middle of the board. And I'm thinking, could the white knights jump there and then maybe even put itself one square back and do some zigzag motion, just so it can get itself over to the e5 square. And then once a knight arrives on the e5 square, it's normally a launch pad for even more attacks on the right side.
Yeah, and it's not just that, Ivanka, I love your move because you support the white bishop coming out. You defend this square with the knight and you gain even more time against the black queen. We mentioned Duda maybe not familiar with this opening, or at least this setup, because he's put his bishop, OK, he retreated it now, but he put his bishop out on a square, then he had to step it back. He lost time. He lost one move there. He put his queen on a square where she's about to get hit maybe by the bishop. He's going to have to lose more time with the queen. Also, this rook, what's it doing here? Yes, it's a semi-open file, but it's staring at its own pieces. He lost time there. And also, he's put his bishop behind his own pawns. And that is not good strategy in general. So Magnus now, he's got this really nice option of dropping his knight back. He doesn't need to start with that. Maybe he could bring his bishop out. Lots of options. You could even make an argument for pushing pawns. That's Magnus, very type of thematic move from him. He always goes for these types of pawn pushes. It's just really pleasant for white. The evaluation bar says plus 1.6. That feels slightly, slightly too much, overestimating white's chances, but it's just that pleasant for white. Black has no active ideas. You can't push pawns really on this side of the board. It's just too slow, and pushing in the center would only get captured. And OK, Magnus instead using this square for his bishop, just opening up the white rook on this line, and it's very one-sided traffic. We're about to see Magnus maybe even launch this pawn out the board, going for the black king. It just looks like the worst possible version of this opening for black. And let's go back to the players, because Duda, with the clock situation as well, still facing that uphill struggle. Maybe he's just trying to surprise Magnus with all these weird piece placements, trying to get Magnus out of his kind of opening book, especially wanting to win now, Duda, to equalize today's score. But it feels like he's just been a bit too creative. And as mentioned, all of those small, tiny factors, they build up, they add up into a solid, safe advantage for white.
Yeah, very safe. And yeah, we really don't like this position. And I love your suggestion of stepping forward with Harry and beginning everything, beginning the attack. And what is black going to do? I mean, black's traditional plan in all this is basically to hold the right side of the board. You want to be as defensive as you can over there. And once you've traded off a few of the attackers, then you kind of want to concentrate on opening a line on the left side of the board. But you can't trade attackers. This is the big problem. And instead, black is just sitting there with no space. Black is in danger of getting suffocated here.
Yeah, and look at this. Duda's lost another move. His rook moved across to the square it previously sat on. That was a few moves ago. And it's moved again. Oh, I just think he doesn't know where the pieces belong. And this shows maybe a lack of experience in this type of pawn structure. But it also just shows maybe he's nervous or just frustrated by the fact that today has not gone well for him. Yesterday did not go well for him. So Duda losing tempi with his bishop and with his rook, and Magnus trading off black's seemingly bad bishop, but he's getting the bishop pair. Yeah,
I was going to say, what do you think about this decision to trade the bad bishop? I kind of liked it, actually, because, like you say, get the bishop pair, and you always have that idea of just softening up the right side by pushing Harry a little bit, and you can also maximise the dark square bishop. That's going to get developed at any time soon. Yeah, very, very nice play by Magnus, and Magnus stepping forward with his queen. And in fact, Magnus doesn't even need to play ambitiously either, because this is a solid position, and a draw is also good enough because it forces Duda in a must-win situation. And to me, I'm looking at the cameras, I'm just thinking that Duda looks a little bit sad.
Yeah.
And I had an interesting chat this morning over at breakfast with Swedish Grandmaster Pontus Carlsen, and we were discussing emotions in chess. And we kind of agreed that if you feel angry during the game because you've made a blunder, that is actually an emotion that could potentially help you. It could give you a bit of fire. But if you feel sadness, chances are it will never help. You'll just feel more and more despondent about your position, and you will begin just to crack.
Yeah, you do begin to crack, and it does feel like that way for Duda also. I mean, he hasn't had to make any big decisions. He hasn't had to calculate a single variation, really, in this whole game so far, up to move 17. But he has spent 10 minutes on the clock, under 5 minutes, and the only questions he's had to answer are where to put the black pieces. And he's done OK. Yes, he lost a bit of time in the process. I was critical there. But it's just the clock times. It shows how sad he is, how despondent, how he's lost faith, I think, Duda. He doesn't believe he can beat Magnus, at least in this match. And that's not a good sign, as Jovanka mentions. And White has a very clear-cut plan. Firstly, White is rock solid. It's hard to break through for Black or do anything productive as Black. But White's plan of marching the H-pawn forward towards the Black king, softening up there, I mean, that is very one-sided. And just as I say it, White does advance that pawn forward. This is just typical. I mean, Jovanka mentioned it, I mentioned it. This is pattern recognition. This idea happens all the time for White in other different openings as well. Meanwhile, Duda struggling to come up with ideas as Black. He has, however, played his rook across one square, moving his rook for the 4th time this game already. 4 out of his first 18 moves were with this Black rook. But he does have an idea. And now he wants to explode open the centre. He wants to push the Black e-pawn forward. So finally, Duda stumbles across a plan, but it took him a long, long time. Magnus now has one question to answer, and that's what to do against this pawn push. If Black had waited any longer, then White simply, as mentioned, going to step forward with this pawn, maybe even, say, we give a move to Black, going to push this pawn forward and step forward with the White king, bring the rook over and go for checkmate on this line. But at least Duda is hinting at doing something. And it's quite thematic as well. It's quite typical. If your opponent plays on the wing, you should counter in the centre. So Black now preparing, and Magnus does play on the wing. He pushes this pawn forward. I think Duda has to break out with the pawn in the middle before it's too late, either now or on the next turn. At least if you push forward in the centre, you can try and exchange some pieces off, maybe exchange some knights, maybe even exchange a set of rooks later on. And if pieces disappear, White's attack on this side is going to be far less scary. So, OK, I at least like Duda's plan now. At least his last move, bringing the Black rook across, makes a lot of sense because he's about to open up the position and his pieces suddenly not that badly placed. And there we go, the pawn does push.
Yeah, good decision by Duda. And it's nice to see him finally with an active plan. And I'm expecting after the knight captures the pawn, I'm expecting Magnus to finally develop the dark squared bishop. The rooks do need to be connected. And
Okay,
I didn't see that. Now there's an immediate threat in the position after that recapture because the bishop is threatening to go to the h2 square, give a check, and after the king moves, rook takes queen is a nasty, nasty threat.
Yeah, even if the bishop is captured, Black wins the white queen, discovered check, and discovered attack. So this tension, really annoying for White. 2 ways to deal with it. One is that you capture this bishop in the centre of the board, but then Black's pieces might get active. Another way would be to move your queen or block this line with your bishop in the centre. But, OK, Duda, despite the evaluation bar not liking his decision, he's getting active. He's trying to make a mess of the position, make a mess of things, and confuse Magnus. So big threat, as Jovanka mentioned. This bishop check needs to be dealt with. You have to block the e-file, move the queen, or capture this Black bishop. We know Magnus likes his bishop, so I am slightly expecting this one. But then again, it would come at a downside that now White's queen is attacked and this white pawn on the side of the board also under fire.
So yesterday we talked about, the bishops versus the knights, and you said Judith Polgar liked her knights, Kasparov liked his knights, Fischer liked his bishops. Has Magnus had a clear preference, knights versus bishop? Are we now starting to see, yeah, he is liking the bishops?
Yeah, I think we always guessed that he liked his bishops just from his opening choices. You can actually tell a lot of the time, especially the way he plays the Sicilian, for example, the way he plays the e1, e4, e5 openings. He likes his bishops there. He keeps them when he has white. He tries to take them when he has black. But this match, especially, nearly every game we've seen so far, Magnus has had the bishop pair.
Yeah.
And if you look again, white has 2 bishops, black only has 1. And we could even see a 2 bishop versus 2 knight scenario, which is actually quite rare. Just like we saw yesterday, if white goes and captures this black bishop in the center of the board with his knight right now. So it is weird how you see patterns in kind of in 2 days of matches, which you nearly never see in a whole lifetime.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening in front of our eyes. Magnus just showing us, proving that he does love those bishops. And as I mentioned, there's one downside to capturing black's bishop in the center of the board now. Magnus just trying to weigh up whether it's worth it or whether to play it safe, maybe moving the white queen or blocking up the central line. And yeah, Magnus, he's a bishop man. I prefer my bishops too, but knights are tricky. And okay, as mentioned, one of the options was to move the white queen. I didn't expect this square, the white queen going back to her start square, but she's at least out of the eye line of the black rooks. And Duda, he is getting active. Look at those black rooks stacking up, doubling up on the open e-file.
All right, and thank you to Jarkko from Finland, donating $23. We have made it past $130,000.
Wow. That's incredible.
No, I know. I'm just, I'm so impressed and feeling so much love for the chess community and all our viewers around the world for their incredible generosity. Brian from the UK, Christian from Norway. Thank you to all of you. But we have upped our goal to $150,000. So please keep on donating if you do have the possibility to do that. And also the chessboard, you guys. $5,100. It's amazing. And but the auction, it hasn't closed, so you can still make a bid for it if you want to. All right, Jovanka, you were going to say something about the game.
Yeah.
I don't blame you if you forgot what it was.
No, I think I was probably going to say, I mean, I do like what Duda's doing. He has one sneaky move. He can still play the bishop to the h2, give a check, you know, we like checks. But, OK, now Magnus's time to develop the dark squared bishop. Maybe first capture the bishop in the middle of the board. I mean, what are the chances of Duda even thinking about winning it?
Yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's still difficult.
It's almost, I would put his chances of a win at less than 20%.
Okay.
What about you?
I'd be slightly more generous, but not that much more generous, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, 20% would make sense here. It's roughly balanced. I mean, he's been fighting back, Duda. Actually, the evaluation pass slightly in black's favour. It's much better now than it was about 5 moves ago for Duda. But that's just because Magnus is playing it safe. I don't think Magnus has made any big mistakes. Magnus could have been more ambitious over the last few turns, but remember, a draw suits him. So that's why Magnus is taking these safety first options. And probably, I would say, 50% chance this one's going to be a draw and maybe 25% chance each for either side. But, yeah, I mean, it's still hard to imagine. White just simply has no weaknesses. If you look at most of White's pawns, yes, White has a very far advanced pawn. That's defended. That's actually going to act as maybe a thorn in Black's side on that king position. But apart from that, White has no weaknesses. Everything harmonious, everything defended. It is that rather unique 2 bishop versus 2 knight scenario. I think I've only had that maybe half a dozen times in my career, and we've seen it twice in 2 days now. And yeah, Magnus really loving those bishops. I expect him now to try and keep those bishops if he can. At least he doesn't want all of the minor pieces, all of the bishops and knights to come off, because that would be very balanced. But yeah, it's at least Duda trying things. That's what we want. That's what he needs to do. He's trying to imbalance things, and those black knights are slightly more active than the white bishops, maybe for now, for this next move or two.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I was going to actually eat my words and say I think I'm going to take it back, because there's 2 knights, like you say, they're a lot more active than I visualised, and also there's a few nasty tactical ideas in the air. You know, a move that White would like to play was actually to move the dark square bishop out of the way. You spotted it. Yeah, you know exactly what I was going to say. You would love to, yeah, for example, attack the rook, take control of the dark squares. But this kind of thing isn't really possible, because the knight will actually come to the f3 square, give itself away, and suddenly there will be questions asked about the rook on e1, and it's just loose. And so the dark square bishop can't move. And also, Yeah, this is a very painful position for white. And also, there are other pieces that are tied down. For instance, the white queen. She can't go off on a foray, so maybe she could try and step herself forward and try to connect the two rooks. Well, she could do that, but then maybe there are ideas of the knight coming to the g4 square, and suddenly, if the other knight on d6 moves, well, we have dangerous mating ideas potentially.
Yeah, the queen and knight. We always talk actually about queen and knights in general being the ideal attacking combo, the ideal attacking duo. But here, there are even two black knights attacking. And if they can combine with their queen, that would be very dangerous for Magnus. So I wasn't expecting a queen move. I wasn't expecting Magnus's move either. This rook seemingly active, but as Jovanka pointed out, it's a tactical weakness. It's a target for the black knights. Magnus just pushed it back where it came from. Both sides losing so much time in this game. What do you think of that one, Jovanka?
It's surprising, I mean, but it's a really radical solution to White's problems. You know, he clearly wants to activate his dark square bishop, which is what I was just gunning to do as well, you know, but it wasn't viable to move that piece. So this is why he's played this rather odd move. The only thing that I don't like about this is that Magnus is wasting time. Well, he's using too much time with his rook, putting his rook in the open line, putting it back again. And this is kind of a flag for Duda to actually step forward with one of his knights. This is the time now to play an active move. And I fully expect him to jump with his knight. I can't figure out which one is the most attractive square. It could be to jump to the c4 square, attacking a pawn, or even jump into the middle of the board.
Yeah, it definitely looks like one of the black knights should jump somewhere right now. Magnus did slightly shake his head. The first time we've seen Magnus maybe a bit hesitant. Also, his time advantage has disappeared mostly. So yeah, Magnus, I don't know how he comes up with some moves. Sometimes I said that in the last game. He came up with some crazy, imaginative attacking moves. Now he just lost a move himself, brought his rook back where it came from. First, White retreated the queen to the start square. Now he moved his rook back to where it stood about 10 moves ago. So both sides just coming up with some crazy, strange, kind of bizarre waiting moves. But that's purely because they want to avoid direct tricks, direct tactics that we pointed out on the last go. So, yeah, one of the black knights is likely to move. Duda just trying to figure out. He's spoiled for choice here. He has a lot of options, but only 2 minutes to make this decision.
Yeah, I think he has to jump forward with the knight. And if I were to give it myself a kind of a guess or force myself to make a choice, I think I would choose to put my knight on the c4 square, attack the bishop, attack the pawn.
That looks very logical. Duda hesitating, he needs to speed up. He spent more than half his remaining time on this one move, but it's not going to change the game. It's not going to, I mean, it's not a critical moment. There's no tricks, there's no direct attacks, there's no captures, threats, checks, as we always talk about. So he needs to move. It feels like he's frozen. Maybe it's just the nerves, and maybe it's the lack of confidence after suffering a few defeats against Magnus.
There's also been a change in the position. Before he was just defending, and you know, he looked like he was going to suffer and be just suffering for the long haul. Okay, he decides to centralize his knight. This is good. This is really good. But he could have taken that decision a bit quicker.
Yeah.
And I'm just worried about that. This change in momentum. It means that maybe he's going to take a little bit of time on the clock to shift, and he doesn't have that luxury. He just has over 1.5 minutes to make moves, and that's not a lot of time.
Yes, especially with the critical moments still ahead. At some point, things will get a bit more lively. It's still that fight between bishops and knights. White doesn't want to go and capture one of the black knights with the white light-squared bishop, because the bishops, once they're separated, they lose in power. White needs to keep both the bishops alive, ideally. Because right now, White's kind of major pieces, the queens and rooks, are inferior to Black's. Black's rooks, fantastic, doubling up. That's good strategy in general. Black's queen is quite flexible. As you mentioned, there's some variations where she can actually join an attack against the White king along a dark square diagonal. There's sometimes the Black queen could slide off to maybe attack White's pawns on the left flank as well. But White needs to improve those pieces. So that's why I expect Magnus to maybe move his queen right now, or maybe, I mean, what can you do with the white rooks? That's a big question. I do think maybe Magnus struggling for moves as well. I like Duda's kind of last choice the more I look at it. That bishop retreat as well. Keeping the bishops alive, preventing any trades. Black not being able to capture either of them right now, but Magnus's maneuvers have been very, very slow, very time-consuming. He's retreated his queen, his rook, and his bishop now on the last few turns. Not ideal for white. Duda actually, the momentum's on his side on the board, not on the clock. And this one, it's as if it's reaching boiling point finally. We've been just watching this position bubble, bubble, bubble. And now, boiling point, he has to move Duda. He's spending more time again. He has to move his knight, maybe improve the black queen. The white queen is attacking black central pawn. Just defend it if you want to. You just have to move. You have to decide. Okay, he does defend it with his rook. Now, however, the rook's not teaming up, not aligned with each other. If you look at the black rooks previously, that was where all the action was happening on that e-file. The black knights and white bishops all stood on that file. That's why the evaluation bar is slightly in white's favour. I think he should have defended this pawn with the black queen instead. And, OK, Magnus does have a bit of a luxury move here. Black has no threats. White's dark square bishop can step into the centre of the board. White's queen can move. Some choice.
And also, once the dark squared bishop steps into the middle of the board, just look at the diagonal it's occupying and look at the squares it's controlling, those squares around the black king. And then suddenly, there are even... OK, he does it with the queen. Surprising to me, because you can guess what I was itching to do once I had centralised that bishop. Push some pawns and push them as far up the board as possible and open those lines. But OK, Magnus instead deciding to, just improve the queen. And finally, the rooks are connected. And, wow, it seems like Duda is the one reading my mind. But I don't know about this one. What do you I think it's a little bit too bold.
Pawns don't move backwards, remember, so black's pawn pushes leave so many weaknesses behind. Look at the black king suddenly. It's on some open diagonals. And what does white have? White has those bishops on the diagonals. OK, first Magnus brings his rooks closer to the centre. That's where the action is kind of focused right now. And if the white bishops, especially if white's light-squared bishop suddenly lines up with the black king, that's just game over. OK, one of the black knights stepping back away from its nice central post, attacking the white queen. White's queen will just slide one square back, most likely. And, even if the white queen continues getting harassed by black's knights, remember, white, for Magnus, a draw is fine. It's an OK result. OK, Magnus doesn't just retreat the queen, allowing maybe a repetition. Magnus gesturing there, shaking his head. Has he just blundered a pawn?
Oh, yeah, he has blundered a pawn. Couldn't there be a trade of queens? And then suddenly, look, there's a loose bishop on e2. But Duda played instantly.
OK, maybe this is...
Missed chance.
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand. I'm trying to do some quick calculation, but it looks like both sides just, for that one moment, missed something. And I would love to jump in because Duda may be missing a huge opportunity in this position. Magnus offered a trade of queens, but why can't you just trade the queens off and then now notice loose pieces drop off? That's one phrase that all chess players know. This is a loose piece, white's light squared bishop. It's going to drop off after black's knight jumps out the way, for example, taking a pawn in the process. After white recaptures, whoops, this bishop drops. And what has black done? Black has won a pawn. Also, this rook, super strong. Duda, we saw the evaluation bar shoot up in black's favour just for one move. This is very elementary. This is really basic. He could have won a pawn. Maybe he didn't want to head for the endgame. Maybe he thought Magnus could hold the draw here, but wow, instead, Duda not going for the queen trade, he brought his queen to the centre. He wants to go on the attack, but wow, Magnus throwing his bishops around, using this bishop to go and capture a pawn on the edge of the board, seemingly a useless pawn, but that's because the bishop, if it's captured, suddenly the black knight next to it would lose its protection. And, wow, things are really heating up. I mentioned they would. The black rook now stepping forward, hitting the white queen indirectly, maybe the bishop behind it on the 6th rank. This one is really chaotic. Suddenly there's a huge threat. If black's knight jumps out the way, then suddenly white will lose a piece, and Magnus is grabbing pawns.
But can you grab that pawn? I mean, isn't there some kind of attack, like the knight can step backwards? And look at that, double attack, one on the bishop, one on the rook.
Yeah, this is really...
either.
This is really mysterious, and it's on the board. I think Magnus's intention is to give up this bishop. He's about to lose it because of this double attack. I think he's going to take this pawn and just accept the fact that, OK, he's lost his bishop, but he's got 3 pawns in return. This one is chaotic now, and this has actually happened. This position is on the board. Also, look at the white queen. She's on a nice diagonal against the 2 rooks and against the black king. This one is crazy. It's anyone's game. That's white. Look at the two players, their body language. Let's go back to them because white has lost a bishop, but he's gained 3 pawns in the process.
Is he playing Dubov kind of chess now?
Kind of.
Kind of, but with less risk because he does have 3 pawns for the piece.
And, yeah, lots and lots of moves coming thick and fast. But now the black queen is attacked, and maybe things are turning in Magnus's favour because if you step to the wrong square with your queen, for example, if you step away, then white is going to be delivering nasty checkmate to your king at some point. So, OK, the queen steps back in this direction, covering this key square, not allowing white to use it. Oof, this one's heating up, but suddenly I'm liking the pawns. These pawns are going to start running up the board. They are unrivaled, 3 versus 0 on this side of the board. And black's knights are good, but maybe not quite good enough here.
They have no point, and there's also no way that the piece, the extra black piece that Duda has, can actually mobilize itself. I mean, it's just in a purely defensive role. I think Magnus has made a smart choice, and he's driving the knight back. But I know I liked your move better, David. To the point. Promote the pawns.
Slightly scared of the white king now. The white king looking much more open. Previously here, it had nice shelter in front of it. That's why I thought, OK, black has no threat. Why not push pawns? But, OK, this pawn push, now the black knight is going to step. I mean, I'm not sure where. It can step back. It can step forward. It at least threatens some checks now. The position, OK, and this is happening. Magnus, is he losing control again? No, he drops his bishop back. There's a knight check, and he's got to be really careful. But this black queen now, can she jump into the position?
If she jumps in, then
the black rook drops off.
Yes.
Yeah, she has to keep an eye on her black rook. So maybe sliding across this way, lining up with the white king. It's still crazy. Let's go back to the players. 17 seconds, plays 1.5 minutes.
He has to make that move. I think that is the only move to keep the chances alive. And he retreats the queen. OK, I mean, is there even moves such as the rook? I was thinking of...
What were you thinking, Ivanka?
Decoy. I was thinking of decoying the queen, but OK, maybe that wasn't possible.
9 seconds for Duda.
Yeah. And tension, because look at the e-file now, where white's rook lies, black's queen and rook as well.
3 seconds.
1 second.
He has to make a move.
Wow.
OK, he pushes a pawn. That was pure panic. And now look at this, Magnus just locking in this black knight. Black's knight in white's camp is trapped. That knight now struggling to find an escape square, but there's a counterattack against white's queen. Magnus maybe just slightly rushing that last move. I think he could have won some material maybe, but white's queen now under fire. Where is she going to run to? There's still this remaining threat against black's knight on the e2 square. It's trapped, as mentioned, but how can Magnus just close that cage? Where is the safe square for white's queen? Magnus this time frowning. Both players super nervous, you can tell on the body language. They really, really want to win this game, both of them.
Yeah.
And white's queen, I'm expecting her to maybe just slide back. She ideally wants to keep herself on the same diagonal as black's king, but then she will no longer attack black's knight at the bottom of the board. What's the number 1 priority here? It's not clear.
Can she slide back 1 square on the diagonal?
The problem is, OK, she does this, I think the most natural move. The problem is now black's knight can jump out the way, white's queen not attacking the black rook anymore, and OK, Magnus is pinning. Is he winning? We see a trade of pawns there. The white queen pinning the black rook, but the black rook defended sufficiently.
Bar saying it's a draw. Do you think it's going to end up with a win for any of these?
It could still... both sides are running out of pieces, though. That's the problem. Magnus, though, banking on his pawns. We could see a scenario where the queens and rooks will disappear, and black's knight will face off against those 3 white pawns. And that could be very good for white. That could be very good for Magnus if he can push those pawns further. But if the pawns fall, black has an extra knight.
But actually, the position could be headed into a draw because I suspect that Magnus will just step forward with his queen, pin the rook, and every time the king tries to break the pin, the queen will just give a check.
Will Duda... Yeah, I was going to say, will Duda play for the win, though? Magnus gesturing there.
Yeah.
Maybe he just missed that this was possible because black's knight is jumping towards that white king. Some vague threats now against white's king from the black knight, but Magnus ignores it. Nothing immediate to worry about. There is still this pin, remember. Black's rook is stuck, cannot move. That would be illegal, so black's queen has to stay defending it as well.
And also, now that this knight has gone to the right side, is it in time to catch the Alice, the A-pawn?
That's a good question. White's pawn is running very fast up the board. So if white now gets another move, OK, the black knight defends its rooks. I was going to say, if white gets another move and trades off the queens, trades off the rooks, then that white pawn is simply going to win the game. But now the black queen can move. And she does that.
And there's a big threat on the board.
Oh!
It's going to be
Magnus
checkmate.
shaking his head. Black's queen wants to go and on the diagonal in front of the white king. That's checkmate in one move. Duda's turned it around. Magnus is on the brink of defeat suddenly. The queen coming to the f2 square in front of the white king. That's checkmate. How do you stop that threat? You can only do that maybe by trading queens. But black has an extra knight at the end of that. Magnus, he's blown it. White's pawn as well. The A pawn about to fall. White's pawn there. It ran too far up the board. Alice is lost. And was it maybe the game? Magnus,
Oh my God.
despondent. It turned around in one move.
Look at that reaction. And Jan Christoph Duda could be about to make a comeback in this second match in the final. If he wins this one, they're going to be tied in the second match. And if he wins another one, well, they could be heading to tie breaks. Wow.
Magnus simply forgot that this is checkmate in one threatened. He thought here that he could play rook takes rook. If white captures the black rook with his rook, black looks like he's forced to recapture with the knight and white can trade queens. White actually wins there. Maybe Magnus thought he was winning. He simply forgot that if white captures the black rook, black doesn't need to recapture. The black queen swoops down, checkmate. Look at that black pawn on the g3 square. It supports a mating net, as we call it. And, OK, Magnus is forced to trade queens, but now the black rook is going to slide across, stop that white pawn, and it's just a clean-up job, as we said in the last game. The pawns are falling. There goes one. It's now only 2 pawns for white against that black knight. It's not enough. Black's knight is actually going to become a very strong piece shortly. And white needs to activate the king. It's an endgame after all. Yeah. But black can even consider trading rooks here, possibly. Black can bring the rook across with a check, swap those rooks off, and maybe that's winning for black. It's still a bit of calculation to be done. Duda can also improve the black knight if he's unsure.
Yeah.
Duda is winning. It's his to lose.
I mean, just take a look at Duda. I mean, what a change.
Right.
He's suddenly leaning forward, looking at his pieces. He is in full calculation mode. He knows his luck has turned. And, yeah, this is now incredible for black.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even too difficult, I feel.
No.
The black knight, once it improves itself, there we go. Going to the edge of the board, but it's going to re-centralise itself soon. It's all about black's g3 pawn that we did mention. That's 2 squares away from promotion. If black can remove the pawn in front of it, especially with the black knight, it's just going to be game over. Magnus's pawns, they're actually held up right now. They're stuck because the black rook keeps an eye on them. And Magnus, can he pull another miracle out of the bag? He goes active with the king.
I think this is a good practical chance. If Duda does decide to give a check, this is OK. But the white king can just slide on the diagonal and, OK, and we're going to see it.
Yeah, the problem is I think you can safely take this pawn in the next move, no matter where white goes.
Yeah, because
now
there's going to be a check.
There's always going to be a check. Knights are so tricky. That white pawn now is going to drop. Black's knight can simply feast on it on the g2 square, attacking the white rook. OK, instead, Duda offers a trade of rooks.
Yeah.
If the rooks disappear, black's knight is simply going to gobble up that pawn and win the game.
Ah.
Yeah, and also black's king, notice if the rooks get traded off, black's king is easily in time to stop white's pawns, whereas white's king now too far away to stop black's pawns. So Duda really sensitive to the moment, and he understands where the kings belong.
So Magnus will not, he does not want to trade off the rooks.
He has to run away. He has to keep his pawn guarded. Look how sad this rook feels right now, guarding just a mere pawn in front of it. Now the black rook can even come down and attack that pawn, reinforce the threat there. That looks very strong. Black's king could also start just meandering across towards the white pawns just to stop them ever advancing. Too much choice. Black could also give a check with his rook. Actually, maybe that's just very strong, giving a check with the black rook now. White's king, no matter where it goes. The black knight can jump in. Black can even be a bit flashy and think about giving up his rook. Got to be a bit careful, but jumping in with the knight is
And we're
safe.
seeing exactly that. And
Now just go and capture a pawn. Looks very safe.
And,
all the pawns dropping.
white can't even get enthusiastic and try to say, hey, I'm going to pin your knight, because the knight can just take a step backwards. Yeah. And Magnus trying this trick, but the knight steps back, the rook is protected, and suddenly, yeah, it's the knight is easily going to hold off white's outside pass pawn. Meanwhile, it is going to be the pawn on g3 is going to win the game for Duda, and it's going to be a big comeback.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just when it seemed like Magnus had banked it, actually. You know, he's playing a great game.
Yeah.
And then it got wild, and Magnus was the one that blundered last.
Was he too confident at some point there, Magnus?
I think so. And for the first time really in this whole match yesterday and today, Magnus was quite low on time in a wild position. It's that key word, wild. Wild favours Duda. If it's a controlled position, just manoeuvring, slow, steady, that favours Magnus. OK, here we go. Duda's king just making its move over to this left side to stop white's pawn. And as Jovanka mentions, black's knight eventually is going to go back the other way towards the right side of the board and pick off the remaining white pawns there once Duda has dealt with this left side of the board, that one remaining hope. And OK, well, he doesn't even do that. He just steps forward with the black king. And oh, wow, actually, Magnus doesn't even try to save this game. He resigns in a hopeless endgame.
Yeah.